Here we're going to work on the data layer for our Minutes app. We're going to code a class named Entry to store the data for a single meeting. All the code we write here is going to be platform agnostic, which means there's no Windows, Android, or iOS specific API calls in it, and it can all go in our shared project. Here's a wireframe mockup of what the Minutes app might look like. We have a list here of several meetings, and our goal here is to write a class named Entry to store the data for one meeting. Here's a simple UML diagram for the class. So it's going to be named Entry, and it's going to have several properties. First is going to be the title of the meeting. You can see that over here displayed in the list. It's also going to have content. That's not displayed in the list, but those are the notes that whoever recorded what happened in the meeting would take, and both title and content will just be strings. We're also going to store create a date so that the user can know when the meeting occurred, and we do have that in our list view here. And finally, each entry is going to have a unique identifier that we're going to use for storage. And here I am over in Visual Studio. I'm going to be working completely in the shared code project here. I'll add a new class, call it Entry. And I'm going to go ahead and make the class public. That's not really required, but this is a good candidate to be broken out into a separate assembly at some point in the future. You can have 4 properties. The first one is just the title. And the second one would be the content of the meeting minutes. Next, I'm going to add the creation date, which will be a date time. So that's the time at which the meeting occurred. And finally, we needed a unique ID number for each entry. And we're just going to use string for that. When the client creates an entry object, they're going to need to set values for title and content. But these two right here, we can set internally. And we have 2 options for doing that. We could add a constructor and set them in there, or we could use the C# property initialization syntax and do it right here. And this will just save us a couple of lines of code. And for the ID, I'm going to use the system.GUID class to create a unique identifier. And there's a new GUID method, and I'll just call toString on that to get the string version. And the last thing I want to do here is override toString. I'll just concatenate the title and create a date. This will be useful when we start displaying these entries in the list view. The default behavior for list view is to call toString on the objects inside it. So we'll use that first before we start customizing the way the list view displays.